Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is basically a show and tell. I don't know if you remember those from school days. I'm going to be rattling through the story of how I came to produce this. This looks very small and not impressive, but there is an online version, a PDF version of this, which is on the web, which you will see the link for in the programme and also on the slides. And I just want to tell you, as a sociologist of education, why did I end up turning a research report into this? How did I do it? And was it worth it? That's kind of what we're going to go through today. So let me tell you a little bit about the research project first of all. So at the top of the slide, we've got the title of the original piece of research. So it was Greater Expectations of Graduate Futures, a comparative analysis of the views of the last generation of lower fees undergraduates and the first generation of higher fees undergraduates in England. Already that's very wordy. The title of the comic is Higher Fees, Higher Debts, Greater Expectations of Graduate Futures. So you can see that all the way along there's a little bit of translation from wordy academic research to more palatable public product. So this was a funded piece of research. The main reason was to look at whether the increase in tuition fees was having any impact on graduates' decision making, what they do when they come out of it. There was nothing written on this. So please come in, sit. As long as you're not at the front, you can sit wherever you like. So this was a 2-year piece of research, and we did in-depth interviews with just under 100 final year graduates, final year students, and basically the upshot of this externally funded piece of research was a 50-page research report, traditional textual document. Now, when that was produced, me and the team, so there was me, I was at a different university then, and there was 2 researchers from Manchester University. We were really stunned by some of the findings in this comparative qualitative piece of research that really had big questions for higher education policy. So it wasn't enough for us to just produce this report and have that on the funder's website. I wanted to send that report, this is the textual one, to interested stakeholders. So I sent it to policymakers, journalists, I sent it to NUS, probably about 30 different organisations. I sent the report, printed it out, sent the report with a nice handwritten cover note. I got no response to that, which made me feel quite cross and a bit frustrated. And then when I visited Manchester again to see the team, and we were looking again at some of the words that the interviewees used. And I've given you a few examples here on the slide. So down in that bottom corner, one of the students talked about their debt just hanging around like a black cloud. Now, I'm a sociologist, but I've never done anything I'd consider myself creative but not artistic. So I thought that was a very visual way of communicating how that student felt. And then we noticed in one interview transcripts there were loads of examples of this very graphic visual language and metaphors and analogies. And then when we looked at, we're like, oh, this one's amazing. And then when we looked at the others, we're like, they've all got it. So we knew there was something that could be done, but we were very limited in knowing, well, what could we do about it? We've got this big report, what else? So really, that's the antecedents of where the comic came from. It was the quality of the data itself. So again, look, this is the last page of the report. All those really important findings, those punchy questions for policy, there. This is what that page looks like when translated into... So I'm just giving you a little taster there. So same points, but just visually illustrated. Okay, so what next then? So we've noticed there's some graphic imagery in the interview transcripts. The actual project is now finished. So we've got the data, we've done the analysis, we've got the report. What happened was I'd had this initial conversation about, oh, this is interesting, isn't it? What could we do with it? We didn't know. And then at the institution I was working at before Derby, they had a small funding scheme, and it was to write up studies for publication, but I decided to risk it and put in something that I called, I wanted to carry out an impact strategy. Again, I made this up. I knew that it had Research Excellence Framework terminology so that people might be intrigued by it. And this is what I actually wrote. This sounds really, well, I was going to say, I'm not going to swear. So this is what I said. I want to commission a student illustrator to create 4 visual vignettes, like grown-up comic strips, based on the findings from the Graduate Futures project, to tell the story of the findings in a more human, succinct and accessible way, which will aid wider public engagement. So I'm trying to communicate to senior academics at the university that this is what I'm aiming to do. Now, I kind of knew what I meant. I didn't know how to go about doing that, and I didn't know what that would look like in practice. But the form that I had to fill in also required you to put costings in. So I did a little stab in the dark and said £1,500. I think that was just under the maximum you were allowed to ask for. And put in some for printing, because I thought whatever this visual vignette thing was going to be, that I'd want some printed as well as to be online. So you can see that I'm kind of making it up at this point. So that was successful, and then I thought, okay, now I've got to do it. So I used my connections within the university in the creative arts department, faculty, to say, look, that I've got this, I need some help to translate what this actually means into something that's doable. So my friend, who is an illustrator, put me in touch with the course leader for a cartoon and comic arts course, because she knew that for their final year they had a live briefing module where they're looking for clients that the students could produce stuff as part of their portfolio. So I met him, and he was immediately, he read that thing and said, it's a bit poncy, Katie, but I know what you mean. We can definitely do something with this. So he said, come and meet my students. So I went and met 30 final year comic artists, and that was really it was really daunting, because they looked at me just like, what are you doing? And what I did was I'd printed out 2 anonymized interview transcripts, and I gave those to the 30 students, so they all had the same transcripts. And I just said, if you're interested in responding to this brief, what I'm asking you to do is take 2 weeks and have a go at visually representing what that transcript says to you. So 4 people out of those 30 got back to me with responses to the brief, and this is the kind of thing that they got back to me. So these are all pseudonyms. So Annie was one of the transcripts, and Grace was the other. So what I ended up with was 4 versions of Grace and 4 versions of Annie. And that for me is when it was that bit that I just thought, right, this has got legs, because the really amazing thing was, I shouldn't have been surprised as a qualitative researcher, but was how each one of those students interpreted the transcripts differently and with different kind of graphics and visuals. And it really sort of opened my mind as to what would be possible. So this is me working with the 4 students in their studio, and when I've been talking to other people about this is where I, as a writer, a traditional academic writer, it helped me to develop my graphic imagination by interacting and talking with these students. So this is where that made up bit of blurb from the proposal actually turned into a viable, whatever visual vignettes were going to be, we're now talking about a 30-page comic book, which if you'd have talked to me, 3 months before that, that would not have been in my mind. So we employed all 4 students, not just one, we employed all of them. And I had to learn about, you don't get paid by hour. If you're an artist, you get paid per page of work, well, for comic art anyway. So I was able to pay them industry rates. They took on different, some only did a couple of pages, some did 10 pages. So we negotiated that, divided up the labour, and then the hard work began, because of course I didn't know what was actually involved in producing. I didn't know how we get to this. So I was thinking I'd just give them the transcripts, they'd have a couple of weeks, do me a storyboard, and then I would get it printed. That's what I thought would happen. That's not what happens. So I basically had to build a relationship with each of the 4 students, and I had to work very differently with each one. But this was my favourite bit, was the hand-drawn things. I'd actually get physical envelopes sent to me with drawings in. It was excellent. And this was the process of our joint interpretation of how the students' words should be represented. I tweeted the whole process, so I was trying to make as public and as visible as possible the process of producing the comic, and built up a lot of interested, comic artist followers, but also academics who were interested. And then here's this point about, I thought it would take a maximum of 4 months. It ended up taking 6, but I was okay with that, because they were learning and I was learning, so that was fine. So I'm just going to show you some of the pages from the comic. So what we did was I chose 8 of the interviewed students, and we did a double-page spread on each of those, so that the reader of the comic gets to meet 8 of the students, and then they get a synopsis of the findings of the report as well. So that we all followed you can see the sort of different styles that the artist had. And again, I was originally thinking I'd have the same style throughout, but when 4 of them got back to me, I thought it would work having a mixture of styles. So we produced the comic in a PDF format, and then I think I got about 500 printed, and I'm down to like the last 4 or 5 now, and really don't want to give those away. But it's freely and widely available to download from that link there. And then this is where it got interesting for me, because then I sent this to all of those people that I sent the report to and got no feedback from. And I had people ringing me, I had people tweeting me back, I had people emailing, saying, this is really interesting, can we do a phone interview about this? And I just thought, yes, well, there we go then. It's exactly the same information. So I did a big kind of Twitter dissemination, and I asked people when they received their copies if they were on social media, if they could photograph that and tweet some of their thoughts, as critical as they wanted to be, encouraging this kind of open communication and conversation about some of what the findings mean. So the Times Higher asked to do a phone interview, which I did, and then this is what ended up getting printed. And I was very keen that whenever I was using social media or doing press about it, that I was constantly mentioning the artist, the comic artist, because remember, they would have graduated by the time I'd finished this, which meant they're now freelance artists. So it was trying to give them as much exposure and visibility and credit as well. The local paper in Stoke-on-Trent, where I live, also picked up the story. An academic comic scholar also picked it up, wrote an article on that. And then to end with, I just wanted to point out that I didn't, I'm very clear that I did not make this up as a kind of genre. That since doing this, I've now found so many other social scientists, hard scientists as well, that use the graphic and the visual for communicating their findings. And to me, it's opened up a wonderful world of how you can represent, translate, really important, from my point of view, social policy ideas. And every project that I get involved with now, I will write something like this in from the beginning, rather than how it happened this time, which was an afterthought and at the end. And yeah, no, I think that's it. So, oh no, maybe I've got one more slide. Yeah, so this is just where I'd leave it. Sort of, these are questions that I ask for myself now with every research project that I take on, and something that I'd offer out to you. It's very similar to what one of the other presenters, but when you've got that final piece of research, those of you that are doing your thesis at the moment, think about what are, not what is the whole conclusion, but what is the headline that comes out of your research. And then who are the people that need to know about that? Who are the audiences? Who are the stakeholders? Because whoever your audiences are, the messages from your study might need to be slightly different for each one of those. And I find that when you can think about who the audiences are, that's when selecting the method of engagement is probably going to be best. So I didn't follow these rules when I did this. And so this was, in some senses, kind of limited in that I don't think I did get to the audiences with this that I wanted to. That doesn't mean that I won't during the next year, but because I hadn't got a systematic way of thinking about it, it was all a bit on the hoof. So yes, when you've selected your methods of engagement, that's when you can think about the timing that's available to you and what support and resources you need. So obviously I employed students to help me with the art and the visual aspect of it. You don't always need to pay them, because if it is part of their course, course leaders are crying out for genuine briefs. So please do contact course leaders, not just at this university, it could be at MMU, it could be at any university, Salford. In fact, there's an amazing graphic design team at Salford. So yeah, and what I'm trying to do with social media now is connect with a range of graphic artists and looking at photographers. There's loads of things. So for me, this is just the beginning, but I just wanted to share this kind of one-off. So that's me done. Thank you.